Something happened at New Life Covenant Fellowship that absolutely nobody saw coming, and what unfolded at the Holy Convocation during Prophet Brian Kay's closing sermon has now become the kind of whispered legend that travels faster than wildfire through every corner of the gospel community. A moment so unexpected, so electrifying, and so controversial that people are still trying to process what they witnessed. And today you're going to hear the full story, the unfiltered version, the version insiders refuse to discuss publicly, the version that exposes what really happened behind that pulpit on the night that left hundreds frozen in awe, confusion, disbelief, and raw emotion. From the very beginning, the atmosphere in the Grand Hall felt different, thicker, heavier, charged with an intensity that longtime attendees couldn't fully explain, but instinctively recognized as the calm before a spiritual storm. People traveled from across the country expecting inspiration, hope, and a flawless finale to the Holy Convocation, but tension was brewing before the lights even dimmed. Behind the velvet curtains and polished smiles, staff members whispered about disagreements over what Carn intended to preach, murmured concerns about controversial announcements that had been hidden until the final hour, and a few uneasy voices even questioned whether this service was about to take a direction unlike anything this fellowship had ever experienced. And yet, when Prophet Brian Kay finally stepped onto the pulpit, the entire room exploded into cheers, hands lifted, feet stomping, voices shouting. But beneath that thunderous welcome, an undercurrent of something unspoken rippled through the crowd, a sense that tonight was different. His sermon began softly enough, wrapped in familiar encouragement, echoes of messages he had delivered countless times before, but those paying attention saw it immediately: the unusual intensity behind his eyes, the sharper tone in his voice, the brief pauses during which he seemed to consider how far he was willing to go. Then, without warning, the atmosphere shifted. The once steady rhythm of his sermon took a sudden turn, veering into territory neither safe nor predictable. He paused mid-message, looked directly into the sea of faces before him, leaders, elders, visitors, first-timers, and delivered a statement so bold, so raw, so piercing that it sliced through the sanctuary like a lightning bolt. Every whisper stopped, every hand froze, every breath seemed suspended in the air. Eyewitnesses later described that instant as electric, like the room itself inhaled and forgot to exhale. Longtime members leaned in toward one another, whispering, "Did he really just say that?" While newcomers sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to clap, cry, or brace themselves for whatever would come next. Even the choir behind him paused, their expressions flickering between shock and disbelief. Only after the service did insiders reveal that this wasn't a spontaneous outburst. This moment, this declaration, had been the subject of heated backstage discussions. Staff reportedly warned Ka that such a revelation could spark internal conflict, ignite backlash from influential church leaders, and potentially divide the congregation. Others believed Khan knew exactly what he was doing, that this was a calculated move, a prophetic strike, a deliberate choice to confront issues that had simmered beneath the surface for months. Because this wasn't just a statement, it was a direct commentary on internal practices, leadership decisions, and delicate matters that people had whispered about privately but had never dared to address publicly. And once those words hit the air, nothing could soften the impact. Tension crackled like electricity, murmurs rose like a tide, gasps came from every corner of the hall. Some attendees broke into tears, overwhelmed by the sudden exposure of long-ignored truths. Others stiffened in anger, their faces hardening as they processed the shock of hearing things they believed were meant to stay behind closed doors. A few shouted from the back, not in disrespect, but in disbelief, unable to contain the raw emotion bubbling inside them. For the first time that night, the congregation wasn't simply listening to a sermon, they were witnessing a moment, historic, controversial, unforgettable, a moment that would redefine how people viewed Prophet Brian Kay, the fellowship itself, and the future direction of the ministry. And as the tension swelled and emotions collided like storm clouds inside the sanctuary, one undeniable question surged through every heart in that room. What is going to happen next? What no one in the Grand Hall of New Life Covenant Fellowship could have predicted was that Prophet Brian Kay's bold first statement was only the beginning of a chain reaction so explosive, so emotionally charged, and so spiritually unsettling that it would reshape conversations across the gospel world for weeks, even months afterward. Because the moment those words left his mouth, the atmosphere, already thick with tension, shifted into something almost electric as whispers rippled through the crowd, and the real drama began brewing not just in the sanctuary, but behind the curtains, where staff, leaders, and insiders were already bracing for fallout. And just when it seemed the tension had reached its limit, something happened that completely flipped the energy in the room, a moment that eyewitnesses described as surreal, unforgettable, and so shocking that people were still trembling as they left the building. Mid-sermon, with the congregation still frozen from his earlier revelation, Brian K. suddenly altered his tone. His voice, once measured and encouraging, dropped into a deeper, more piercing register that made everyone in the front rows sit up straighter, their hearts pounding as they sensed something far more intense was coming. Then, without hesitation, he began addressing a controversial topic head-on: accountability within church leadership and the hidden tensions that had been brewing behind the scenes. Topics that had swirled as whispers for months but had never been spoken aloud in such a direct, public way. And as he spoke, some members visibly flinched, their eyes wide as the truth washed over them, like a silent wave rolling across hundreds of souls. Cameras captured close-ups of attendees leaning toward one another, whispering urgently, exchanging glances that carried shock, fear, and a strange sense of relief that someone was finally daring to speak what others only dared to think. Then came the pivotal moment, the gesture. Some say it was subtle, others swear it was bold and deliberate, but when Prophet Brian K. pointed toward a group of staff members seated together in the corner of the hall, the impact was instant and unmistakable. A hush fell over that section as staff members stiffened, exchanged alarmed glances, and seemed unsure whether to stay seated or leave entirely. Insiders would later reveal that this was the precise moment a minor confrontation nearly erupted backstage. One staff member reportedly tried to signal the pastor discreetly, pleading for him to soften his tone or shift the direction of the sermon, but Brian K. continued undeterred, his delivery sharp, unfiltered, unwavering, as if he had made peace with the consequences before he ever stepped onto the stage. Meanwhile, reactions in the congregation were all over the emotional spectrum. Some attendees burst into tears, moved by the courage it took to expose sensitive truths, while others were visibly upset, their murmurs growing louder as they questioned whether such matters should be aired publicly. Within minutes, social media posts from inside the sanctuary lit up the internet with phrases like, "Never seen anything like this," "shocking revelations," and "the truth finally told," turning the closing service into an instant viral moment. And just when the congregation thought the tension couldn't escalate any further, Ka dropped a second revelation, subtle but powerful, a statement implying that even deeper issues had been simmering beneath the surface, issues that insiders had speculated about for months but never expected to be unveiled in such a direct, public manner. Those in the know described this moment as the exact point when the congregation realized they were not witnessing a typical sermon, they were witnessing a reckoning, a turning point, a spiritual and organizational earthquake that would define the ministry for years to come. By the time the service ended, whispers had grown into heated discussions, and attendees poured out of the sanctuary, buzzing with curiosity, excitement, confusion, and in some cases, outrage. The footage, which later went viral across multiple platforms, sparked debates among gospel commentators and religious leaders nationwide, each offering their own interpretation of Ka's shocking address. But while the congregation was still processing what they had witnessed, the real storm was unfolding backstage. Behind the scenes, insiders described the atmosphere as electric, tense, almost volatile. Staff members were divided, some furious, others relieved. Some claimed Ka had crossed the line, dragging internal matters into the public spotlight. Others argued that he had finally done what needed to be done to restore accountability and transparency to a leadership structure that had long avoided scrutiny. Voices rose, emotions clashed. One source described it as a balancing act on the edge of a spiritual cliff, with cameras rolling, audience members lingering in the hallways, and staff members trying desperately to maintain composure as sensitive matters unraveled in real time. Behind closed doors, murmurs escalated into urgent, whispered arguments. Some attempted to rein Brian in or soften the brewing crisis, while others quietly documented every detail in anticipation of fallout that would stretch far beyond that night. And adding yet another layer to the chaos, a few unnamed leaders reportedly confronted each other backstage, arguing about how the sermon might affect the church's reputation, its public image, and even its internal hierarchy. What was meant to be a triumphant conclusion to the Holy Convocation had transformed into a moment that exposed divides, ignited long-buried frustrations, and set into motion a storm that nobody, not even Prophet Brian K., could fully control. One insider admitted that heated exchanges broke out backstage as leaders and staff argued over whether Prophet Brian K.'s revelations should have been shared at all, creating an atmosphere so charged that some described it as a potential storm brewing behind the pulpit. a moment where emotions ran dangerously high and rapid decisions had to be made to prevent the entire event from spiraling into chaos. Yet, despite the tension erupting in quiet corners and whispered hallways, Prophet Brian K. remained astonishingly composed, his focus razor-sharp, his demeanor unwavering, as he continued delivering his message with a boldness that many said felt almost defiant, as if he had stepped onto that pulpit fully prepared to confront whatever backlash his words might provoke, because he believed the truth was worth the risk. For those witnessing it unfold, this was the moment that revealed the true depth of his conviction, the willingness to confront controversy head-on, even when it threatened to strain relationships with staff, leadership, and deeply influential members of the congregation who had long preferred that certain topics remain buried in silence. Then, almost immediately after the service ended, the insider revelations began, leaking into online spaces like wildfire, whispers of disagreements over specific sermon points, speculation about long-standing leadership disputes within the church, and hints at subtle internal conflicts that had gone unspoken for years. These details fueled viral debates and set social media ablaze as religious commentators and gospel insiders dissected every word, gesture, and pause in Prophet Brian K.'s delivery, debating whether his bold stance was an act of reckless transparency or a courageous breakthrough that the ministry desperately needed. By this point, it was clear to everyone that this holy convocation wasn't just another annual event. It was a watershed moment, a turning point that peeled back layers of raw truth, tested loyalties, and captured the attention of thousands, many of whom had never stepped foot inside New Life Covenant Fellowship, but were now watching every clip and every commentary with wide-eyed fascination. The combination of electrifying delivery and backstage tension created a perfect storm that left attendees buzzing long after the final amen. And just when it seemed the drama had reached its peak, an unexpected reaction emerged, one that took the controversy to an entirely new level. As congregants streamed out of the hall, still buzzing with shock and disbelief, many confessed that they had never witnessed a closing sermon like this, a moment that somehow managed to inspire them, challenge them, and provoke uncomfortable questions about the very foundation of their faith community, all at the same time. Within hours, community social media pages exploded. Videos of Prophet Brian K.'s sermon circulated rapidly, pulling in viewers from around the country who watched in disbelief, their comments ranging everywhere from, "Finally, someone is speaking the truth," to "This crossed the line," highlighting the deep divide in reactions. The clips went viral, shared across multiple platforms as debates raged not only among followers of New Life Covenant Fellowship, but across the wider gospel world, as pastors, worship leaders, and gospel commentators weighed in, each offering their own analysis of what this meant for the future of the church and for Prophet Brian K. himself. And then came the wave of backlash. Some longtime supporters felt blindsided, claiming the revelations were too raw, too abrupt for a public service. Others worried that airing internal issues in such a visible way might damage the church's reputation or strain its leadership unity. A handful even argued that, though truth is essential, certain truths should be handled privately, not announced to a room full of worshipers and thousands more watching online. Yet, even in the midst of criticism, there remained a large and vocal group who praised Prophet Brian K. for his fearlessness, calling his sermon a necessary wake-up call, a bold demonstration of what true leadership looks like when faced with difficult circumstances. Insiders later confirmed that the ripple effect extended far beyond the congregation. Staff meetings reportedly became tense, leadership circles held urgent discussions, and the topic dominated conversations both in church halls and online forums. Some members revealed that new policies and transparency initiatives were discussed directly because of Prophet Brian K.'s sermon, proof that his message struck deeper than anyone expected. And just when the uproar appeared to be settling, a new twist emerged, an unexpected behind-the-scenes clarification from Prophet Brian K. himself. In private conversations shared only with select insiders, he hinted that the issues addressed in the sermon were merely the surface of something far deeper, suggesting that what the public witnessed was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning. Those who heard these statements described them as cryptic yet compelling, leaving them with a sense of anticipation and unease, wondering what further truths were waiting to be revealed. The combination of a stunning sermon, intense backstage conflict, viral public reaction, internal leadership shifts, and hints of further revelation cemented this closing service as one of the most unforgettable, controversial, and transformational moments in gospel history, an event that people will be analyzing, debating, and remembering for years to come. The New Life Covenant Fellowship Holy Convocation will forever be remembered, not just for its spiritual messages, but for the raw, unfiltered truths that shook the room. What unfolded on that stage took courage, conviction, and an uncommon boldness. As the dust settled, one thing became impossible to deny. Prophet Brian K's closing sermon wasn't merely a message. It was a moment, a declaration, a challenge to the status quo that ignited debates and sparked conversations far beyond the church walls. What began as a routine conclusion to a sacred gathering suddenly transformed into an unforgettable moment of reckoning. In a matter of minutes, the atmosphere shifted. Every word Prophet Brian K spoke landed with weight. Every pause carried meaning. Every look was a statement of its own. His sermon inspired many to reflect deeply on their faith and the structures within their communities. But at the same time, it stirred tension, disagreement, and controversy, because transparency, when unleashed, never comes quietly. It confronts, it divides, it inspires, and that is exactly what happened. This moment solidified Prophet Brian K as a fearless voice, one unafraid to call out what others only whisper. But it also served as a reminder of the delicate balance between leadership, accountability, and public perception. Those in attendance walked away with more questions than answers. Online discussions erupted. Private conversations grew intense. And as the echoes of this sermon continue to spread, one thing is clear: its impact will influence future gatherings, decisions, and perhaps even the direction of New Life Covenant Fellowship for years to come.